Hi, I'm Kevin Lee with the eMarketing Association. Most of you know me as the founder of Did It, digital first ad agency that's transitioned from search into pretty much everything with 11 acquisitions. I also run Giving Forward, a cause marketing centric nonprofit. It's in the middle of launch mode, so I'm pretty busy. Today, I have the privilege of talking to Rob Griffin, who's been in digital just about as long as I have and is now at Business Online. Rob, the first question I have for you is around account-based marketing. ABM has been huge for mid to large size B2B marketers. But a lot of the smaller B2Bs are sort of like, oh, I don't have the data or I don't have the infrastructure. Sort of how should the small to mid-size B2B marketer think about ABM and execute ABM? Do they have a path to make ABM work for them?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think they do. The short answer is yes. But I think the biggest, misconception with it, a lot of it is even some of the larger organizations, when we work with them, they'll go out and get a Terminus, a demand base, a 6sense, and for our world, right? You joked about you and I doing this a long time, that the ABM platforms is kind of a CDP and a DSP merged together specific to B2B marketers. So at the end of the day, it's not that new. It's just natively having a couple different functionalities bundled together. But the biggest mistakes is the bigger companies have the budget, so they go get the technology, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, we're doing ABM." And when we end up working with a lot of clients, what you find is, yeah, you got the technology, but they almost need to back up and do some preliminary strategic work up front. So to me, it's really about a process, a strategic way of thinking about it. It's all about aligning sales and marketing and how can marketing help sales. And so, whether you got the technology or not, it doesn't mean you're necessarily doing great ABM. And so you almost have to back up. And one of the things we like to do is, take all of last year's closed won deals that a company had and do some reverse engineering and some smart analytics, and then append that data with either Crunchbase or Dun & Bradstreet, and really start to understand, what types of companies are you selling your products to? Is it companies under 500 people? Is it companies over 1,000 employees? What's the revenue range of companies? Is there different geographic footprints? What verticals are you heaviest in terms of total number of clients that you've sold into? But maybe the category that you have the highest number of clients in, maybe you have the lowest amount of like median average contract value and revenue to the company. What categories do you have the highest contract value in revenue for as a company? And so, and then using that data and looking at intent analysis, we do a process of sales discovery where we do an interview series with all the senior sales stakeholders. And so at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is create an ideal customer profile, and all the attributes of who is the company's best customer and what does that profile look like, and build that off of synthesizing qualitative and quantitative data inputs. And then out of that, you can go build a targeted account list and figure out what types of companies do you want to put your marketing dollars on, what kinds of companies do you want to tell your salespeople to focus on. And it's a degree of prioritization. And I think small companies, even if you can't afford an ABM platform, like you can do that process and give yourself a little bit of focus, and whether that be a search campaign or a LinkedIn campaign, or even how you're optimizing your website. That's all doable. And then companies that are bigger or have invested in an ABM technology, you're going to get more value out of your investment, and maximize sort of the benefit and the value you're getting out of that technology if you do all that work up front. So I think to me, that's whether you're big or small, you have a technology, don't have a technology, that whole sort of process of analyzing sort of what types of companies are you closing, what do your closed loss deals look like, what are those profiles, what sort of intent data do you have available? What is sales telling you they need? How does that compare to the data you have? At BOL, we use IBIS World, which is a research tool, to do a lot of vertical and category research to also understand for any given client, if you're selling into auto manufacturing, or you're selling into chemicals, or you're selling into wireless routing, or whatever your category is, that you're selling your product into, what's disrupting that category? Why is a company in that category trying to buy your product? Because at the end of the day, they're not buying a product, they're buying a solution to a problem they have. And what is that problem? What are the sales triggers? And so again, big or small, I think that's pretty basic stuff that you can do in Crunch and Excel, without a big fancy attribution model, without a big sexy piece of technology. That's just basic B2B marketing fundamentals.
Right, right, absolutely. When you talked about sort of the company adopting ABM with buy-in and sort of taking a step back, it sort of reminds me of some of the early failures in CRM where they buy the technology first. They'd never actually get buy-in from the sales team, and so of course the data would be missing, right? So it seems like you really, in both cases, you need to get everyone involved. Need to make sure that the data in there is good data, so that it's actually actionable. Whether it's
Yep.
CRM or ABM.
Yeah, and to make it work, one of the things we always talk about is this concept here at BOL about aligning minds, right? You're trying to align the minds of the end buyer, the end user of the product you're trying to sell, but then you have to align the technology stack from the MarTech to the RevTech to the ad tech, and make sure there's a level of interoperability of that data so all the systems are enriching each other. Going back to your point, data hygiene is really important, because when you're trying to combine different data sets, it's sort of the analogy I always use. It's sort of like building railroad tracks east, west, west, east, and you get to the Mississippi and they don't line up. What do? Because data is not actually, even though it's all the same data, it's categorized differently. It might be in a different column. It might be in a different row. Maybe there's missing data fields. And so you got to make sure there's a quality of that data that's enriched so you can do something with it. And then lastly, you have to align the organization, to your point, right? Marketing needs to know how to help sales. Is it about creating net new opportunities to fill the pipeline? Or is it about air cover and penetrating accounts and helping sales speed up the velocity of the pipeline with known strategic accounts? And then how do you prove it to the CFO and finance and justify the investment and show incremental return on that investment and how it's improving the campaign? And like you said, even with the CRM, if you go technology first, you don't have a baseline. So how are you showing incremental gains? Like, you have nothing to compare it to, right? So it's almost better to start without it, build that baseline. And then when you implement it, you can show that for this investment, I got this incremental gain, right? And then again, that really helps align the organization. So finance actually starts to see marketing as an investment in revenue, not as a purely a cost center, right?
Yeah, within B2B, right, you sort of, commissions are like cost of sales, marketing is a separate line item, right? So, and it's a lot more fuzzy in B2B than it typically is in sort of consumer-based marketing, as to sort of exactly where the line between marketing initiatives and sales initiatives break, right? Because the sales team says, well, marketing's job is to get us to Glengarry leads, right? And so, and then they get passed over like a baton. But the reality is sort of there's this gray zone in the middle where, okay, is this coming out of the marketing budget? Is this coming out of the sales budget? How do we make that seamless transition so that in fact, we're not just getting leads for lead's sake, we are in fact getting the good leads, the ones that have higher lifetime value, the ones that have higher conversion rates, et cetera. That forces sales and marketing to be more aligned in B2B, because, when you're selling cereal or you're selling, toothpaste, LTV may be a factor, but I'm not sure that makes it all the way into the marketing plan.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And to me, that's the beauty of what ABM is, right? Instead of it just being a buzzword and everybody wants to talk about it, because if you're just in the business of generating leads and you're putting them into like an old school direct response, Lester Wonderman model, right? And what he coined direct response advertising and marketing at a speech at MIT in 1967. And he laid out 7 principles of what direct response marketing was. It's a strategy, not a tactic. It makes marketing and sales a single affair. It creates enduring relationships. It builds a dialogue. I think one of them was, it gets rid of like the middleman in the middle process and sort of connects sellers and buyers more closely. To me, I mean, I already said that back in 1967 about direct response, but to me, that's really what all ABM is all about. Right. Because if I'm just doing a demand gen program generating leads, you could argue you're doing the same thing as ABM. I'm targeting accounts, but I'm not nurturing those accounts through, and I'm not bridging the gap between what does the data tell me the accounts we should focus on? What does sales think we should focus on, right? Whereas in traditional lead gen, you're just going after leads. And then sales' job to vet the quality and the percentage of those leads. And invariably, the flaw of that whole model is most salespeople will be like, oh, marketing sends me shit leads.
Exactly.
Right. And it's like, well, of course they're shit leads. Like marketing's job in that environment is just to generate volume of leads. Well, a very small percentage of them are going to be qualified good leads. And the whole point of ABM and synthesizing the qualitative and the quantitative inputs is to, one, get better leads. And when there is a known lead or an opportunity, you're using marketing to kind of move that opportunity to a deal stage, right? So in theory, ABM should address that problem and make it less fuzzy by, to your point, bringing sales and marketing together.
Right.
Now,
Right.
in theory, that makes a lot of sense. Doing it in practice is different. And thankfully, it's hard to do, which is why, we
have jobs.
I have a job, right?
Yeah, exactly. One of the luxuries that we've had as digital has evolved with regards to B2B marketing is, the data got richer and it was easier to cherry pick out the good ones, right? And so, of course, we're in the year where some of that targeting data is disappearing, both in the consumer side and in the B2B side as a result of erosion of third-party cookies and IDFA. So, what's our solution as B2B marketers? Like, how do we make up for the loss of data? Is it just that, we can't target to quite the same level of granularity? Do we have to sort of rethink our media mix, as we lose some of that precision?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, being a fan of like marketing history, going back to like Lester Wunderman, he talked a lot about, I remember reading a book of his when I was in college back in the mid 90s called Being Direct, and he said, what was it, like 60% of your effort is your targeting, 30% of your effort is, the offer, and then it's 10% the creative. I feel like given the data change, the value of that creative is going up. The quality of the content that's going to be a lot more going forward than that 10% in that traditional model, because it really comes down to impact. And so one of the things I think we see happen is your traditional ICP in B2B in the ABM world is really heavily based on firmographic data, company size, like we were talking about a minute ago, right? Revenue size, what are those attributes? And then I'm going to go target that. And that's still important. But because of the change in data that's available outside of a walled garden, like maybe a LinkedIn, there's less and less of that that's available that you can target off of. So I think a lot of the focus for, ICP going forward and how you kind of prioritize in your TALs really comes down to fit and need. Like, what is the product solving for at the end of the day? And then if you create good content around that, what you're trying to do is entice engagement. And then you can start to map your content from top, middle to bottom of the funnel. And if somebody comes in and they engage with a top of the funnel piece of content, I can then retarget them with a middle of the funnel piece of content and use that as an assumption of intent, and then target them with more of a bottom of the funnel, talk to a salesperson, sign up for a free trial, take a demo, and kind of nurture that along the way through. And by using gated content and quality video, quality ebooks, and again, just impactful creative and content that really addresses fit and need of the end user, you can then really entice that engagement, and that gives you something to retarget off of and sort of build your retargeting pool, build your targeting profiles that you can go after. And it's really about getting somebody into the funnel and then following up with them either through retargeting of display or videos or webinars along the way, or emails, and getting them into the marketing automation and the drip nurture stream. Whatever that looks like, it's about thinking that through and kind of building your own sort of custom targeting and intent graph along the way. And I think the beauty of B2B is we have all the mechanisms to do that, maybe even better than B2C does. And so we actually, even though I think a lot of B2B companies don't realize it, because of the nature of the way that works, if you have that content right and really aligned to the fit and need of the audience you're targeting, you're going to pull people into that fold on your own, and you're really less reliant on the third-party kind of generic data that's available in the marketplace. And you can really start to understand the context and the intent of that engagement and kind of start to map out sort of what does that user experience and flow looks like. If somebody comes through and they sign up for my white ebook, what do I serve them next with? You know, I remember being back in marketing school, people always talked about this starburst approach to brainstorming, right? You know, that every question should spawn more questions and it's less about spawning an answer. You know, and the same thing if you think about it from a full funnel ABM program in the world of B2B, and if you're really trying to deliver performance in that, you know, like, all right, they signed up for the ebook. Well, what am I doing next with that? Like you have to have that entire nurture stream kind of thought out in terms of what next, what's helpful to them, and what do I need them to do to get them to a point where sales can go close that deal. And so I think all that's available in the world of B2B, and it's not reliant on third-party data. And I mean, you and I have been doing this long enough, and the irony in the B2C world is it's all shit data anyways. There's so much flawed data in there to begin with that you're kind of just taking a law of averages and kind of rolling slot machine style, rolling the numbers that it'll pan out on the back end, knowing that there's a lot of waste along the way. And in theory, with B2B and ABM, is to generate performance of digital marketing, you can remove some of that waste. I mean, it's a lot more work to get there, but I think the quality of the output on the back end is better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, given that we started the conversation for the last question around media, it's interesting how heavily content factored into your process, which really overlaps into the earned media world, right? And so some CMOs, regardless of B2B or B2C, but particularly in B2B, you know, when it comes to taking whatever the total budget is and sort of allocating it around content marketing, content creation, you know, upper funnel, mid funnel content, SEO, syndicating of content, you know, whether or not they want to do B2B influencer marketing, like some of that stuff, the ROI is going to be harder to demonstrate ahead of time, but you absolutely need it, more so now that we're losing targeting granularity. So what's your pitch to the CMO? Like, hey, we've got to invest more in sort of upper funnel content in order to feed the rest of the funnel.
Yeah, I mean, for us and me, the way we look at it is, again, going back to that aligning minds and really understand the buyer, you know, in really making the ICP and building out TALs, again, based on fit and need, less about more like hard sort of, you know, firmographic numbers. I mean, that's still important, but really understanding the need. Part of that process is we do a whole content gap analysis and say, you know, because what happens with a lot of B2B brands is they got a lot of content, but it ends up being a lot of digital brochureware, which is still valuable content. But to me, that belongs in the middle of the funnel. You got to entice them into the funnel with more thought leadership, understanding the category, understanding their problems. And then once they're like, all right, I'm interested, then they need to like check the box, right? Like, what are the feature benefits of your product? Now I need that brochureware kind of mid funnel. And then what do you have kind of at the bottom of the funnel that's going to get them over that hurdle, right? Because that's the hardest part. You get a prospect to the 95 percentile sort of point in closing a deal. That last 5% takes like the longest to kind of get them to sign on the dotted line and cut a check, right? So, you know, that's really making sure you have the right content that will help do that. You know, our head of strategy and creative always says that like our job in working with clients isn't to help them sell anything. It's to help their target buy something, right? And so if you think about that from the content and creative perspective, you're kind of turning that on its head a little bit. And when it comes to like earned media, you know, there's a lot of SEO benefits, right? And I know that's near and dear to your heart, you know, and one of the things we think a lot about is what is the role of SEO and ABM, right? And where does it fit in that sort of multi-touch? Because in addition to the content gap analysis, we also try and align channels against buyer stage. And what we do is we use a stepped approach to measurement, right? And thinking about step functions, right? Like not every KPI should be a registered user, a lead, or a closed won deal. It might just be somebody socially shared our white paper. Great, indication of intent, right? Or maybe we're optimizing mid-funnel campaign based on who spent at least 2 minutes on the website. You know, the challenge for B2B though is this whole rabbit hole of a debate of gated versus ungated content.
Yeah. How
much do you gate to get the lead? You know, but if that content's really good, well, you're getting no SEO love out of that content. You're not going to be showing up, right? So how much of it do you ungate to get some of that earned traffic from quality content? You know, and then even the whole content syndication category, I think just like what you and I went through, 5 or 6 years ago with like programmatic in the B2C world of uncoupling a lot of the components that go into it, because a lot of content syndication at the moment, it's kind of a black box. I create a piece of content, I give it to a partner, they share it with the publishers they work with, and I get some leads out the other end. Some of those leads are good, some of those aren't. Where that content went and what people did with it, I have no idea. And so like one of the initiatives I'm trying to do is kind of unbundle a lot of that content syndication so you can actually understand what levers you have to pull and what's driving that performance, and where, to your point, are there earned exponential opportunities. And if you can start to unravel some of that, that's how you go back to a CMO and say, if you create the right content, here's some of the earned opportunities that you'll get. And some of that's also just helping clients be really smart with Google Analytics. In GA, you have conversion goals. Most clients I find will tend to just set a conversion goal as a conversion. But I can set a conversion goal as 2 minutes on site, 5 minutes on site, how many people socially shared a piece of content. So when we're running campaigns, what we like to do is use conversion goals and be really creative of what we do with them. So even if we're running a content syndication program and the job's to get a lead out the other end, which we can track, I also want to know for all the touch points that we got that didn't generate a lead, how many of them socially shared it? How many of them spent 30 seconds on the site, 2 minutes on the site, 5 minutes on the website? And what are those other metrics going on? So I can start to paint the picture of what we're earning for people that maybe are further up the funnel and they weren't ready to convert to a lead yet. And then using assisted conversions within a 30-day window, how many people came back maybe and converted later? And so it's really about helping the CMO kind of paint the bigger picture and tell the story holistically. One of the things I always talk to clients about is this idea of, digital marketing is like, it's like your investment portfolio. Some things have a high return, some don't. And you're really looking for that balance, right? So you don't want to just cut all your underperformers, because we know the flaws in digital tracking. What I don't know about those ones that are underperforming, are they actually driving some of the things that look like they're performing? And I'm just not able to attribute the two. And I've seen that a million times over. You go and kill everything that looks like it's not working, and all of a sudden your best performing tactic starts performing not as good. And you're like, oh, wait, I think that might have been feeding that. So again, you got to try and paint that whole holistic story of what the full funnel looks like, how all the various touch points work together in the digital portfolio, again, with the end goal being, moving more prospects through the pipeline. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants leads, but you really want revenue out the other end. Leads is just the easy way out to be like, yep, I got you your leads. But at the end of the day, you really want to move beyond that, right? And it's really about helping the company generate revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I use to sometimes remind people that the upper funnel needs some TLC is the idea that you never want to be in a situation where you never even made it into the consideration set, right?
Right.
You can harvest demand all day long with search by people raising their hand when they're absolutely ready, and you might miss that one. And if you had no earlier touch points with that with that buyer, right, then you lost, right? You never even had a seat at the table.
Yeah, because you're catching them too late, particularly in B2B. It might be a 6 to 12, 18-month sort of sales cycle. And if you hit them once all the data tells you they're in market, well, they've already whittled it down to 3 or 4 potential companies, and you're on the outside looking in. So yeah, they have the intent now, but you didn't influence them and get yourself, to your point, in the consideration set. And that's one of the things, looking at B2B from a performance perspective, right? In a measurement perspective, to me, it's like that upper funnel activity, not just does it need TLC, but it needs its own level of accountability. Just because it's an awareness campaign doesn't mean I shouldn't have any metrics. I think that's a big fallacy. It's like, oh, it's an awareness campaign. Well, yeah, but how many people engaged with it? How many people, viewed that video more than once? How many people completed that video? How many people shared that video? There are metrics you can put against that. And if you start to think about it, even without direct attribution and using a fancy, expensive 6-digit attribution platform, again, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, just being really good with Excel and having somebody that's good with data, you can make some correlated loose attribution assumptions that, oh, what I noticed is that if I optimize my top of the funnel awareness to somebody that spends at least 2 minutes, because if they spent 30 seconds, they weren't interested. If they spent 5 minutes, I lost them and I confused them. But if they on average spend 2 minutes, my middle of the funnel metrics go up. And then my bottom of the funnel conversions go up. Right. And so you can kind of play around with that top and then look at the impact in the middle and the bottom of the funnel, even without like a linear sort of sophisticated attribution platform. You can test out some assumptions just by being really smart with analytics.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like to go through with B2B marketers in particular, but also B2C, is sort of list out all the positive things that could happen that we can track, right?
Yep.
And then grade them in rank order, because a lot of them are going to be leading indicators, or as Avinash would call them, micro conversions, right? Because they're not really conversions yet, but they're just things that are leading us to believe that if this happens, it's better than it not happening, right? And
Yeah.
so whether it's social shares or email shares or the fifth page, on the white paper or whatever it is, it's just sort of a good indicator that what you're doing is working. And I think too many people are focused on the final KPIs, right? Not the leading indicators, that they miss out on a lot of efficiency metrics. To your point about, just because it's top of the funnel doesn't mean we have nothing to measure.
Yeah, because that really helps you prioritize everything else you're doing going down the funnel, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that's almost like pre-conversion nurturing. Everybody talks about, like, you do a content syndication program, you get a bunch of leads. And it's like, well, I feel like the mistake a lot of companies make is you take those leads from content syndication, you give them to sales, and they pick up the phone and they cold call somebody. If I'm the client, I'm the person you're calling. It's like, whoa. Just because I signed up for your white paper, man, doesn't mean I'm ready for you to buy anything yet. Like, take it easy. Where's the nurture stream? Like, what follow-up content are you going to use after they've registered for that ebook or that webinar to nurture after? But what you're talking about is nurturing from top of the funnel awareness metrics down to bottom of the funnel conversion to lead. And then there's a nurture stream that occurs after you get that contact information. And that all has to happen before you kick it over to sales.
Right.
Right. And I think the beauty of digital is that's all trackable stuff. Again, going back to your point, it's privacy compliant without third-party data. Because the way I envision it is, you don't just kick sales over a bunch of leads. What you want to do is almost send the lead over with a digital dossier. They engaged with this. This is how many people in the company engaged with it. This is how often they're coming to the site. This is the content that they're reading, and almost giving them a little bit of context to the lead. So when they do pick up that phone, they're not just like, hey, Joe, you downloaded my white paper. Because I mean, you get it as well, right? You and I are in digital media. There's nothing worse than when I download somebody's white paper, and then all of a sudden I get an email from a rep being like, hey, I want to give you a demo. When can we get on the phone? And I'm like, I just thought your white paper was interesting. Like, I don't want to talk to you yet. So like, where's the nurturing before you pounce the salesperson on me, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I was laughing was because if the salespeople aren't trained, it comes off creepy. Because especially if you're using a de-anonymization software on your site, right? And you're like, oh, we think it was, you came in, you did a white paper 3 months ago, and then you visited us again last week. So are you ready? It's like, whoa.
Yeah. It was funny. A couple of weeks ago, we were on the phone with a client, and we were talking about this very topic, right? And I forget exactly how he phrased it, but I love this. He described that when that happens, that's the equivalent of like knocking on the door of like your neighbor's house and inviting yourself in, jumping on the couch and being like, you want to watch Netflix with me?
Or right? I noticed through the window you were watching Game of Thrones. I'm watching it too. Let's watch it together.
Yeah, and just like inviting yourself in to watch Netflix with them, right? Like, and it's like, whoa, wait, why are you in my house? Like, I don't want to watch Netflix with you. Like,
yeah. So there's a lot of things, moving pieces around in marketing right now. Not a lot of new channels are popping up, a lot of new methods of targeting, new ways that we can dynamically do creative for people. So, what's most exciting for you over the next 6 months? Like, what are some of the shiny objects you think maybe have some potential over the next year?
I mean, honestly, I think it's a lot of the ABM platforms for clients, and it's really the clients investing a little bit more in them, not just getting the ABM platform. Because if you think about the ABM platforms, you kind of have the base platform, and you can like sling some banner ads off of it. You can integrate it in with your LinkedIn campaign, And yeah, that's great. It's better than a lead gen campaign. You can be a little bit more sophisticated. You can put the tags on the client site and, to your point, de-anonymize the traffic, and I can load some keywords in and start to make some intent assumptions and building my own graph without third-party data. But to me, the holy grail that gets me excited about it is when you start getting to the orchestration of the predictive level of it, where you're integrating that ABM platform in with your MarTech, with Eloqua, with Marketo. You're integrating that platform with the RevTech, like a Salesforce. And now you're actually starting to pull that data in, because there's a lot of work you can do to align the organization and the minds by getting input from different people and kind of playing matchmaker and conductor or ringleader in the circus, whatever analogy you want to put on that. But I think the beauty is taking the machine learning and like the AI that has existed for a long time in the world of digital, whether it be dynamic creative or dynamic landing pages or targeting, but applying that off of engagement metrics coming out of the marketing automation tools, the conversion in the revenue data, like I mentioned, doing that reverse analysis on closed won deals. Well, instead of me doing that manually and then statically trying to key that into a system and set up targeting profiles, if I can automatically take that data and update it every time the client's sales cycle runs through itself, like if it's a 6-month sales cycle, that data is updated every cycle, right? And so that means my ICP and my TAL is not static. I'm dynamically updating it based on changes, what's going on in the world. And to me, that's what gets me really excited. And that's where I think the real fun stuff starts to happen. But to do that well, clients got to invest additionally, going back to what we said before, the content and creative become incredibly important. Because if I'm going to start making my TAL and my ICP and doing this all much more dynamically based on AI, I got to have the content to feed that machine. Otherwise, I'm just browbeating the same target over the head with the same stale piece of content. And to your point, you come across somewhere between creepy and like Willy Loman in Death of a Salesman. No, I don't want a vacuum. And then you throw dirt in their carpet to show them how good your vacuum cleaner is. And you're like, dude, what the hell? I just said I don't want a vacuum. You just threw dirt all over my floor. Right. So you got to have the content to kind of feed that. And I think that's the opportunity. And that's the stuff that gets me excited. You and I have known each other a long time. And I love the really cool technology, but the trick is making sure you have the right components to feed it. Otherwise it becomes like, just like, us as consumers, right? How many apps do you end up downloading on your phone that you never end up using? The same problem happens in the technology stack for marketers. You get one and then you never really fully utilize it. And then 1 or 2 years later, when the contract runs up, you don't renew it. And you got to get to that time to value. And so I think that's really where it's exciting. And the challenge, which is a fun challenge, is helping marketers kind of figure out like, what kind of fuel do you need to be putting into this machine so it can go do what it's supposed to do and do it well, right?
Right. Cool. Well, it was wonderful catching up. Look forward to continuing to learn about your journey and implementing this stuff for clients. And appreciate you joining me for an EMA conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, let's do it again in a few months, and I'll tell you how this went.
Absolutely. Well, some of us may actually be back in offices, and we'll have to see.
Oh man, I'm hoping so, man. Like, I can't wait to go back to an office. I got to get out of my house. It's driving me nuts.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Take care.
Right on.